All right, so what we're going to talk about today is composition. And mainly we're going to talk about the rule of thirds and how we can use the rule of thirds to take a better photograph. We can use the rule of thirds for everything from drawing to painting, and basically it allows us to lay out our composition in a better way. What we can do is, first of all, if we're using something like a cell phone, we need to understand that the cell phone has the grid already on there. So when you go to open your camera, you may have turned it off at some point, but it usually comes preloaded. And what it'll look like are these lines on your screen. Now, those lines will not show up in the picture, but what they allow you to do is take a better photo using the rule of thirds. So what is the rule of thirds? Where does it come from? How does it work? Well, the first thing I want you to do is go turn the rule of thirds, or grid, as it is called on a lot of Android phones, back on. You can find this under your settings for your camera on your phone. And again, or the Chromebooks, they also have the grid that you can turn on. So what is the grid and how do we use it? Well, the grid really, it's not a permanent rule. It's just a tool that we can use to assist us to take a better composition. And mainly, one of the things that I try to teach, and I know that people will argue with me on this, but it's, I think, one of the better rules, is dead center is dead wrong. Now, your composition at some point might call for you to have a centered composition. You're doing, maybe some radial design, or like, you want like a bullseye design. But in general, dead center is dead wrong. The other thing that keeps Mr. Hedges awake at night and, terrorizes him are suns and corners. No suns and corners. In my old classroom, I even had it painted on the wall. And what I mean by that is you shouldn't have objects that are placed in the corner, almost framing your work. Or if you think about when you were a little kid and you would draw that curving sun here, a good rule to follow is to consider this. If more of the item of the sun, for example, is going off the page than is on the page, then it's probably a poor decision for composition. Again, if I were to put a circle here, and my design for my circle had more of the circle going off the page like this than on the page, I really wouldn't want to do that. Okay, so here we have a small sliver of circle versus all this outside space of the circle. So that's a poor composition. Now, can we put things near the corners? Absolutely. Okay, absolutely. So even if I had something like this, it is technically coming out from the corner. But in this case, I feel like there is enough positive here showing that the area off of the corner that we wouldn't see, it counterweights it. So again, that's a ratio that you got to think about. But if it looks something like this, where it's a curve in the corner, get it out of there. We don't want that. So again, dead center is dead wrong, and no suns in the corners. So what we're going to do is, first of all, where does the rule of thirds come from? The rule of thirds is really neat. So it comes from this golden spiral, the Fibonacci spiral. And it's just kind of, I like to call it a dumbed down version of the Fibonacci spiral. Now, the Fibonacci spiral is an amazingly cool sequence. You can find it in all sorts of organic things, or man-made things that use the Fibonacci sequence or ratio. Everything from, fingerprints to, the way your hair moves when it's wet. And we're not going to get heavily into that, but that is something that maybe you would want to look up, the golden spiral or the Fibonacci spiral. It's really cool. But for this, I just wanted to show it to you and kind of understand how when we look at this, our focal point kind of comes right around in here where the spiral goes down into. And this is an infinite spiral. It would keep going out. And again, we'll talk about this in class if we haven't. I think it's one of the coolest things. But what it really does is it shows us that we're bringing our focal point over here, and we could flip this any direction. So really what we want to talk about are the areas that I will refer to as the hot spots. Now, the hot spots are going to be any area where our lines intersect. So that's here, 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 and here. Now, we can also use these vertical and horizontal lines to align a composition. So if we were taking a picture of a landscape at the beach, we would want our ocean to line up with either this line or this line. A lot of times people will line up the ocean with a line straight down the middle, And that is wrong, okay? We don't want to bisect the page. It makes it boring. So let's take a look at someone's art here. So this is a photograph that was taken. And again, this is dead center, so it's dead wrong. So how could we make this better? Well, what we're going to do is align it with the rule of thirds and see if we can't make this a more interesting composition. Now, the first thing we could do is we could move the person so that they are aligned with one of the vertical lines here. Now, I am going to increase the size of this person's design here. And by simply doing that, because we can't just move it because it still has this negative space. So let's go ahead and do that. And what you'll see is one thing, we're zooming in. By making it larger and not changing our canvas size, the image itself, the focal point, becomes more the focus of the work. So the guy sitting there becomes more the focus. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and hit OK. And again, by moving him, so here he is centered still, but closer. But simply by moving him, so you can see there's a line there. Okay, so like the sidewalk. I'm going to move that sidewalk up to the point here. And I'm going to move him over to the right vertical line. Now, just in doing that, I am creating more of a balanced composition of positive and negative space. And when I say that, what I mean is the space where he is not is balanced by the space that he is. And our brains find that to look pleasant. So let's go ahead and throw a little crop on here, get rid of that white space. And I'm going to bring it into the actual rule of thirds. And again, I'm using the hot spot that is right here, lining up with his head. And let's go ahead and turn off the rule of thirds. So this alone has made the composition far better. And not only that, but by moving him over to the right, it allows us, the viewer, to kind of see that he is looking over here to the left, and it makes us kind of view that open space, or maybe he's viewing the person on the bicycle. But it allows us to have more of a design where the viewer's eye moves around the work versus just hits dead center. So again, this should help you frame compositions, and we wouldn't want to do this at the stage of Photopea. I'm just showing you in the program. You should do this with your phone, turning on the rule of thirds or the grid on your camera phone.